2000 Beetle. Check engine light is on. Customer complaint, intermittent stalling, and I believe there's hard starting afterwards. So it's typical crankshaft position sensor fault symptoms. Crank position sensor or engine speed sensor, depending on what you want to call it. G28 is the official nomenclature for nomenclature. Doesn't matter. Anyways, let's see what the fault codes are. Engine speed sensor G28, but I've had it before where a faulty fuel pump will cause a crankshaft position sensor fault code after excessive cranking. So it could even be a fuel pump issue. Looking at long-term fuel trim, 0% at idle, 2.3 part throttle. That's not too bad at all. Let me just see if there was any recent clearing of codes. All readiness monitors have set. Usually after clearing a code, all of these will clear and it'll say not ready or whatever. So most likely nobody has cleared codes recently. So right now I'm just basically letting it warm up and trying to get it to the point where it's gonna stall on me. And then what I'm gonna do is, after it stalls, if it doesn't start, I'm gonna watch the measuring blocks here to watch the RPM signal. If there's no RPM signal that verifies or that further points in the direction of a crankshaft position sensor, aka engine speed sensor. I wasn't told how often it stalls or how quickly it stalls in terms of as it warms up. So this is one of those instances where you can spend quite a bit of time and labor and money basically trying to get this thing to act up. Just like, well, I shouldn't say just like MAF sensors, this can be such a common fault that, especially if it's still the original sensor, throw a sensor in it and you're good to go 90% of the time. It just came online, took quite a while here. Actually didn't even pay attention earlier, but the fact that these numbers are now changing quickly, I would have probably recognized that earlier. That doesn't matter either right now. As you saw, the fuel trim numbers were within spec. That's actually short term. The 32 was long term. So right now I'm holding part throttle, and you saw the numbers change quickly. And the other reason that we saw a big change, it could have been that the ECM was doing some kind of a test at that point. It's obviously stabilized at this point right now. I'm just going to go at idle. And again, at idle, same thing. It should hover around 0, plus or minus. You want to see these numbers change into negative as well, not just hover in the positive. We'll give it a minute to stabilize, and you'll see that number here, lambda control bank 1, will go into negative as well, and that's what you want to see. You want to see negative and positive numbers. And hopefully it'll start stalling out on me once the engine gets hot. More so the speed sensor, the crankshaft position sensor. With age, once they get hot, they just open circuit basically and it not produce a signal. Plus or minus 10% is usually the norm. So seeing these numbers, lambda control bank 1 creeping up to 10, I don't worry about it at this point, because again, block 32 is showing it at 0, 0. Just revving it up some more again. Just trying to speed up the warm-up process. temperatures hovering around 88, 87, actually cooling right now. Tells me it's going down to 85. Tells me that the thermostat is opening up too soon. So paying attention to little details like that, you can already diagnose from inside the car with the scan tool. There should be no reason why the temperature decreased from 88 to 85 if the thermostat is functioning correctly. It should have continued climbing. So I'm quite sure that the thermostat at this point is sticking open, but again, this has nothing to do with the initial complaint, stalling and hard starting. So I'm just going to let this thing run its course until it dies out, and then hopefully catch something on the or with the scan tool. So I'll get back to you guys in a bit. Okay, so right now I have the crankshaft position sensor back probed on channel 1, and my VCDS VAGCOM is data logging, or not really data logging, I'm just viewing, I'm not recording it aside from screen capture. So holding it at 2400 RPM, you can see the signature is fairly stable with a peak of close to 20 volts, positive and negative. It's an AC voltage. This trigger here is number 1. If I bring the trigger down, it'll trigger off of anything here. You can see at idle, obviously the signal is going to be slower, lower voltage. You can see just under 10 volts, and this is the number 1 trigger. You can see the wide missing gap. So obviously the signal looks different at higher RPMs than it does at idle. So I'm just waiting for that signal to either drop out or it gets to the point where it's too weak, and then it causes the vehicle to stall. And then obviously once it cuts out, I can then verify what the computer is seeing by looking at VCDS, the RPM signal, and I can look at the scope. If when cranking VCDS doesn't show any RPM and the scope doesn't show any type of output or signal, or if the signal is there but it's too weak, that again confirms that the crank sensor is the most likely suspect. Sometimes it's difficult to recreate the actual scenario or the conditions that cause a vehicle to act up. And obviously I would like for it to occur so that I can 100% say or find the problem basically, rather than just guess at the part. But like I said, original sensor, 16 years old, odds are it's going to be the reason for what's happening. I have the hood open right now. I think maybe I should close the hood just to simulate or to keep the conditions the same as when it usually happens for the customer. Obviously they don't drive with the hood open, so let me just go reposition the hood or close it up. Something just happened. Something just happened here. My signal looks weird. Now it just stalled out on me. VCS lost communication. I'm going to crank it now. I do shut the key off and on. It's going to establish communication again. You can see the arrow looking for it, or not the arrow, the cursor. I'm going to crank. No RPM signal. I might trigger. Try that again. Just going to check my lines under the hood or at the sensor, make sure that I'm still connected. But it looks like I got a sensor that's not putting a signal out. Okay, I'm back in the car. Cycle the key. I'm just going to go crank it again. You can see my flat line here and 0 RPM right now. I'm going to crank it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. No RPM signal via VAGCOM, and no signal via the scope. So we're looking at a bad sensor. Okay, so we're still flatlined here. Just going to try cranking again. Nothing. And we're going to go back here. Resistance check. View meter. Key off. Disconnect the crank sensor connector. Connect red and blue test leads across pin 1 and 2 of sensor. Resistance should be 500 to 700 ohms at normal operating temperature. And so let's do that. Pin 1 and 2 of sensor should be 500 to 700. Okay, this is where I was tapped into the crank sensor. Yellow, white, and black. The black is the shield. The signal wire is the yellow and the red. It doesn't matter on which one you poke or which one you back probe. The only thing that is one of them is positive, one is negative. So one will one will show the tooth, or the missing tooth on an upstroke, and the other one will show it on a downstroke, if that makes sense. So anyways, we're going to measure the resistance. It's disconnected. It should say pin 1 and 2 here, pin 3, 2, and 1. I don't like the way these are numbered here though, because the black should be the ground, so number 1 shouldn't be this one actually. Could be that Snap-on got it wrong, but let's just see what happens here. Pull this connector up a bit. Nice and warm engine right now. Ah, that's warm. That's a hot coolant hose here. Ow. Oh. See, the numbers are the same on this one. They're not numbered. Okay, let's just pick any of them and see what happens. Okay, so the bottom 2 supposedly are 1 and 2. 1 and 2. Got my ohm meter to ohms, continuity. We're looking for 500 to 700. This is millions of ohms, so just under 1 million. Let's try the upper 2. Uh, 1.4 million. I'm just going to go grab a new crank sensor and check the resistance on it, so I know which pins are the exact ones. Okay, I got a crank sensor here. So I believe it's the upper 2, because the black one is usually the shield. So let's see what this one puts out. Should have put alligator clips on here. So this one's around 900 ohms. So I'm on the 1000 scale here. or I'm on the 1000 ohm scale, and you can see it's 0.89, so which is around 900 ohms. And if I go around the bottom two, which are pin 1 and 2 according to Snap-on, around 1,000,000 ohms, so that's definitely not the ones. So according to their meter, it says pin 1 and 2, which according to this connector is the black and the white, but that's not the case. So you want to measure across 2 and 3, which are the upper two here. So anyways, needs a sensor. I'll re-measure this one once it's cold, but as you can see, it's an open circuit. One more time so you can see it. One 1,000,000 ohms, so that's pretty much an open circuit. Okay, so this is the next morning. The engine's cold. I just want to recheck the resistance of that sensor, and in all likelihood it's going to be okay. There's one, there's the other. We've got about 900 ohms, 0.9352, and it's on the 1000 on the kilo scale, so 1000 ohm scale. So yeah, definitely is a sensor issue. When it gets hot, it opens up. So I'm going to lift the car and replace it or remove it. It's not easy to get to from the top because it's right down under here. So I'm going to lift the car and remove the sensor. Okay, to get at the sensor, you got to take the splash guard off. This one's missing it. T25 torque screws. There's a sensor right here. It's kind of hard to see. I'll take a picture of it with my cell phone later. There's a mounting screw right up there, 10 millimeter. You just reach through here with a ratchet and socket. Just grab onto the bolt and loosen it. As with a lot of stuff, you just work by feel if you can't see something. Once the bolt is loose, use a magnet. Then you can gently wiggle the sensor out. Wiggle and pull, wiggle and pull. Crazy. Pry bar. disconnect the harness, the wiring. Be more fun if there were more room. There we go. Put some oil on the O-ring. Should just drop into place. Hardest part is going to be lining up the bolt hole. Should be sitting okay. Needs to be tight, not too tight, just tight enough. And you just have to route the wiring up. Still a little bit of lube. Oil pan, here's the transmission, and crank sensor is right in there. There's a 10mm bolt, that's the sensor, and then the wiring goes up to the top.